It's your first look inside the house known as the Portal to Hell, a place where demons supposedly wrought havoc with a helpless family in horror straight out of The Exorcist. Did you at one point believe this house was the portal to hell?
There was a portal.
I did bless the house, but, again, things were happening afterwards. The rods were swinging back and forth. There was oil coming down. I was kind of surprised Zach never called, and then I heard he was wrapping up. And so I did give him a call, and he told me that everything went haywire and such.
I'm Zach Bagans. I'm one of the world's leading researchers on ghosts and demonology.
It was at 6.
I have always thought of myself as a skeptic when it comes to ghosts and demons and hauntings. Even in the strangest mysteries like the Odin fires, I have this unshakable feeling that something is missing from the story. I feel that a lot of that skepticism does come from these outrageous stories. Most haunted places in the US fits this cookie-cutter outline of a conventionally spooky case reported to be haunted by the people who want it to be haunted. Hospitals, graveyards, battlefields, those make sense that people will tell a story that spirits still walk those grounds. And that is why a simple house being haunted is so much more terrifying. The fact that a place needs no terrifying event to be marked as haunted. It can happen anywhere or to anything. And clearly this idea in ghost telling works, as it remains the best setting for an amazing scary story. The Exorcist, Pet Sematary, Poltergeist, Paranormal Activity. But what about the real-life encounters people talk about? Locations like the Winchester Mystery House, New York City's House of Death, or even the Franklin Castle. Are they anything like the movies that depict haunted houses as the non-stop scare rides that leads to the owner's demise? Of course not. In fact, most haunted houses are still lived in, simply because it's not really something that bothers the owners. All the stories do is create paranoia, which leads to a harder sell on the housing market because of scary movies in the past. What if I told you about a house that proved me wrong? House that lives up to the title of a true haunted house, in my opinion. I briefly mentioned it at the beginning of my Odin Fires video as one of the most terrifying mysteries in the unusual state. After doing some investigation that includes dozens of articles and even a full documentary I hadn't known existed, I have plunged headfirst into a story that brings nightmares to life. One full of characters that now have permanent scars due to their encounters with the house, and will fervently avoid any discussion about it, due to a common belief that mentioning it will bring hauntings back into their lives. So, let's begin the story. In November 2011, the Amons family moved into a rental house on Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana, a quiet lane lined with small one-story homes. LaToya and her family began living the average American life. Her kids went to school, she went to work, and the family was blessed to be void of any surrounding violence, as Gary, Indiana is notorious for its crime epidemic. It was the best of what the small family had, and LaToya truly believed nothing emotionally or spiritually was wrong with her. She had been raised Catholic by a strict religious family, and regularly attended church with her children. However, the small time of peace LaToya's family enjoyed did not last long as the small strange occurrences began to form in their new home. The flies, big black flies, suddenly swarmed their screened-in porch in December, despite the winter chill. This is not normal, Amon's mother, Rosa Campbell, remembers thinking. We killed them and killed them and killed them, but they kept coming back. Although it was odd and harmless, already her closest family that visited were unnerved by the situation, as flies swarming in the middle of December in northern Indiana is quite unique. But all that changed with the next disturbance that began in LaToya's home. After midnight, LaToya and her mother both said they occasionally heard the steady clump of footsteps climbing the basement stairs and the creak of a door opening between the basement and the kitchen. Of course, no one was there. Even after they locked the door, the noise continued. LaToya's mother said she awoke one night and saw a shadowy figure of a man pacing the living room. She leaped out of bed to investigate and found large wet boot prints on the floor. These were the minor events, and yes, I did say minor, as we will soon see. Despite the red flags, LaToya's family remained living in the house for an entire year before her annoyance began to turn into fright. March 10th, 2012 was the night when the supposed portal to hell began to open. It was about 2 in the morning. Normally, LaToya, her mother, and her children would have been asleep, but they were mourning the recent death of a loved one with a group of friends. LaToya, who was in her mother's bedroom, startled everyone by screaming for her mother. LaToya's mother said she ran into her bedroom, where her 12-year-old granddaughter and a friend were staying. LaToya and her mother said that LaToya's daughter was levitating above the bed unconscious. According to their account of events, LaToya and the rest of the residents surrounded the girl, praying. LaToya's mother said she remembers being terrified. "I thought, what's going on?" LaToya's mother said. "Why is this happening?" Eventually, LaToya's daughter descended onto the bed. The girl woke up with no memory of what happened. The guests who were there to grieve with the family refused to return, said LaToya, which honestly is completely fair, as I wouldn't want to be in a house after seeing a little girl levitate either. At this point, the family was aware of how bad the situation in the home had become, and worse, how bad it could get. LaToya's mother told her daughter, "We need help. We need to talk to someone who knows how to deal with it." LaToya said they didn't know exactly what it was, but they believed it was something supernatural. They called local churches, but most refused to listen due to common disbelief in the supernatural the area has. Eventually, after listening to LaToya talk about the house and visiting it, elders at one church told them the Carolina Street house had spirits in it. They recommended the family clean the home with bleach and ammonia, then use oil to draw crosses on every door and window. At the church's suggestion, LaToya went as far as pouring olive oil on her children's hands and feet, then smeared oil in the shape of crosses on their foreheads. LaToya and her mother even reached out to 2 clairvoyants who said the family's home was besieged by more than 200 demons. Their explanation made sense to Campbell and Ammons, they say because it meshed with their Christian faith. Now, the 200 demons are a popular tagline with this story, but I would doubt that number, especially since the quotes originate from clairvoyants without a religious background or expert knowledge in demonology. Regardless, LaToya remembered the clairvoyants telling her that the best thing to do was to move, but moving wasn't an option for the low-income family. Instead, LaToya said she took a clairvoyant's advice and made an altar in the basement. LaToya covered an end table with a white sheet, then placed a white candle and statue of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus on it. She opened the Bible to Psalm 91. Then she said she and another person donned white t-shirts and wore white scarves around their heads. Also, on a clairvoyant's advice, they burned sage and sulfur throughout the house, starting upstairs and working their way down, the smoke being so thick they could hardly breathe. The person she was with then read Psalm 91 aloud as they moved through the house. "You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday." Then, nothing. For about 3 days. The family said demons possessed LaToya and her children, then ages 7, 9, and 12. The kids' eyes bulged, evil smiles crossed their faces, and their voices deepened every time it happened. LaToya said she felt weak, lightheaded, and warm when she was possessed. Her body shook, and she said she felt out of control. You can tell it's different, something supernatural. The youngest son of 7 sat in a closet talking to a boy that no one else could see. The other son was describing what it felt like to be killed. LaToya's mother said the 7-year-old once flew out of the bathroom as if he'd been thrown, and a headboard once smacked into LaToya's daughter, causing a wound that needed stitches. The 12-year-old would later tell mental health professionals that sometimes she felt as if she were being choked and held down so she couldn't speak or move. She said she heard a voice say she'd never see her family again and wouldn't live another 20 minutes. Some nights were so bad the family slept at a hotel. Finally, in desperation, they went to their family physician on April 19, 2012. LaToya said she told him what they were going through, hoping he might understand. And again, I want to point out that the family had lived in the house for over a year, and within 2 months, they were being ran out by something strange. LaToya's family physician told the Indianapolis Star in an interview, 20 years, and I've never heard anything like that in my life, he said. I was scared myself when I walked into the room. In his medical notes about the visit, the physician wrote, delusions of ghosts in home, and hallucinations. What LaToya and her mother say happened next also was detailed in a report from the Indianapolis Department of Child Service, or DCS. The family case manager's interviews with the medical staff reported the same info the family physician gave. But all protocol for the family physician and the DCS caseworker were thrown away when chaos erupted. During the examination of LaToya and her children, an unforgettable event scarred the physician and the entire EMT crew. LaToya's sons were possessed again while in their examination and cursed their physician in demonic voices, raging at him. Medical staff said the youngest boy was lifted and thrown into the wall with nobody touching him, according to the DCS report. The boys abruptly passed out and wouldn't come to. She cradled one boy in her arms and her mother held the other. Someone from the doctor's office called 911 in the panic. The physician said 7 or 8 police officers and multiple ambulances showed up. They couldn't figure out what exactly was happening, he said. Police and emergency personnel took the boys to Methodist Hospital's campus in Gary. LaToya said hospital personnel laughed at her desire to anoint her sons in olive oil. I couldn't talk to them, she said, so I talked to God. The boys woke up in the hospital. The older boy, then 9, acted rationally, but the youngest screamed and thrashed. She said it took 5 grown men to hold him down. Meanwhile, someone called DCS and asked the agency to start an investigation of LaToya for possible child abuse or neglect. The caller, who is not named in the DCS report, speculated that she might have had a mental illness. The person believed the children were performing for LaToya, and she was encouraging their behavior. DCS family case manager Valerie Washington was asked to handle the investigation. She gave the following account to police in her intake officer's report. Hospital personnel examined Ammons and her children and found them to be healthy and free of marks or bruises. A hospital psychiatrist evaluated Ammons and determined she was sound of mind. Washington interviewed the family in the hospital. While she spoke with LaToya, the 7-year-old boy started growling with his teeth showing. His eyes rolled back in his head. The boy locked his hands around his older brother's throat and refused to let go until adults pried his hands open. Later that evening, Washington and a registered nurse brought the 2 boys into a small exam room for an interview. LaToya's mother joined her grandson. The 7-year-old stared into his brother's eyes and began to growl again. It's time to die, the boy said in a deep, unnatural voice. I will kill you. While the youngest boy spoke, the older brother started headbutting LaToya's mother in the stomach. Latoya's mother grabbed her grandson's hands and started praying. What happened next would rattle Valerie Washington, and to some, it would offer not only evidence but proof of paranormal activity in the family. According to Washington's original DCS report, an account collaborated by the nurse, the 9-year-old had a weird grin, and he walked backward up the wall to the ceiling. He then flipped over Latoya's mother, landing on his feet. He walked up the wall, flipped over, and just stood there, the nurse told DCS. There's no way he could have done that. Later, police asked Washington whether the boy had run up the wall, as though performing an acrobatic trick. No, Washington told them. She said the boy glided backward on the floor, wall and ceiling, according to the police report. Washington told police she was scared when it happened and ran out of the room. As for the nurse, Washington said, he ran out of the room with me. We didn't know what was going on, the nurse reported. That was crazy. I was like, everybody's gotta go. According to Washington's report, they told a doctor what happened. The doctor, who did not believe them, asked the boy to walk up the wall again. The nurse said he told the doctor he doubted the boy could repeat the feat. This kid was not himself when he did that. The boy said he didn't remember what happened and he couldn't do it again, according to Washington's original report. Latoya said she spent the night at the hospital with her 7-year-old son, while her mother took Amons' daughter and older son to a relative's home in Gary. The next day was the 7-year-old's 8th birthday. Latoya said DCS officials asked her mother to bring the other children back to the hospital, presumably to talk more about what happened. The family celebrated the boy's birthday by singing and eating a miniature cake. Then Latoya said Washington told them the children weren't going home. DCS took the emergency step of taking custody of the children without a court order. All of the children were experiencing spiritual and emotional distress, Washington wrote in the DCS form. Latoya and her children cried because they didn't want to be separated. We'd already been through so much and fought so hard for our lives, Latoya recalled. It was obvious we were a team, and we were beating it, whatever we were fighting. We made it through it together, as a team, and they separated us. The Reverend Michael Maginal was leading Bible study in his living room the morning of April 20th, 2012. Maginal had been the priest at St. Stephen Martyr Parish in Maryville for more than 10 years, but had never received a request like this one. The chaplain asked him to perform an exorcism on Latoya Amons' 9-year-old son. Understanding the Vatican laws regarding exorcisms, Maginal agreed to interview the family after Sunday Mass a few days later. The first step, Maginal said, was ruling out natural causes for what Amons and her family said they were experiencing. He visited Latoya and her mother in the Carolina Street home April 22nd. For 2 hours, the two detailed the phenomena for him. Then, her mother interrupted the interview to point out a flickering bathroom light. The flickering stopped each time Maginal walked over to investigate, which he attributed to a supernatural presence. It must be scared of me, he joked to the two women, and mocking whatever spirits were in the home. The interview was interrupted again when Latoya's mother pointed out Venetian blinds in the kitchen swinging even though there wasn't any air current. Maginal said he then saw wet footprints throughout the living room. Latoya complained about having a headache, and Maginal said she convulsed when he placed his crucifix necklace against her head. After a 4-hour interview, Maginal said he was convinced the family was being tormented by demons. He said he also believed there were ghosts in the house. Maginal blessed the house before he left, praying, reading from the Bible, and sprinkling holy water in each room. He told Latoya and her mother to leave because it wasn't safe. They temporarily moved in with a relative. But less than a week later, the two women were back on Carolina Street to let Washington, the DCS family case manager, check the condition of the home. Washington asked a Lake County police officer to come with her. 2 other officers, one each from Gary and the nearby Hammond police departments, asked to join them out of a professional curiosity. LaToya refused to go inside, but her mother agreed to accompany the group. LaToya's kids still were in DCS custody in Indianapolis. The main floor had 3 bedrooms, a living room, 1 bathroom, hardwood floors, and a small open-style kitchen. A door in the kitchen led to a basement with concrete floors. Directly under the stairs was a dirt floor. The concrete around it was jagged, as though it had been broken. The makeshift altar LaToya had created was still in place, along with rings of salt she had poured against the basement walls to dissuade the demons. According to a Hammond Police Department report, her mother told officers that demons seemed to emanate from beneath the stairs. Austin, the Gary police captain, was one of those officers. He later told the Indianapolis Star he believed in ghosts and the supernatural, but said he didn't believe in demons. Austin said he changed his mind after visiting the Carolina Street House. During the police interview with LaToya's mother, one of the officer's audio recorders malfunctioned, according to the Austin and Hammond police records. The power light flashed to indicate the batteries were dying, even though the officer had placed fresh batteries in the recorder earlier that day. Another officer recorded audio, and when he played it back later, he heard an unknown voice whisper, "Hey." Austin said photos he snapped with his iPhone also seemed to have strange silhouettes in them. As I'm aware, these photos have not been released by the Gary Police Department. Later, Austin said the garage at his Gary home refused to open, even though the power was on everywhere else. Then the driver's seat in his personal 2005 Infiniti also started moving backward and forward on its own. He said he had the car checked at a dealership, and the mechanic told him the motor on the driver's seat was broken, which the mechanic said could have caused a distraction leading to an accident. Austin said he found himself starting to believe Amons's claims of paranormal activity. But the mental health professionals evaluating LaToya and her children remained skeptical. In April 2012, DCS petitioned Lake Juvenile Court for temporary wardship of the 3 children. The request was granted. DCS found that LaToya Amons neglected her children's education by not having them in school regularly. The agency made the same finding in 2009, as records show. LaToya told Washington there were times where she could not send the kids to school because the spirits would make them sick, or they would be up all night without sleep. DCS temporarily placed her daughter and older son at St. Joseph Carmelite Home in East Chicago. LaToya's youngest son was sent to Christian Haven in Wheatfield for a psychiatric evaluation. LaToya Amons also was examined several times by psychologists, who said she was guarded, but did not seem to be experiencing symptoms of psychosis or thought disorder. One psychologist recommended LaToya be assessed to determine whether her religiosity may be masking underlying delusional ideations or perceptual disturbances. The entire Amons family continued to insist they were possessed by demons. Then the DCS set goals for the family. One of them stipulated that the children not discuss demons and being possessed, and take responsibility for their actions. They also needed to participate in therapy to address past behavior. While DCS officials credited LaToya for sharing a close bond with her children, the agency also said she needed to use alternate forms of discipline not directly related to religion and demon possession, according to the DCS's case plan. She could work on those goals during supervised visits with the children. LaToya Amons also had to find a job and appropriate housing due to the paranormal activity at the house on Carolina Street. So, in case you missed all that, the Indiana DCS filed a report with the family goals saying the family should take responsibility for their own actions and not blame the supernatural. Then, in the same report, say LaToya Amons should find a new place to live because the house she lived in has paranormal activity. Just so you know, a few years later after this whole story ended, the Indiana DCS had to apologize for the clear mishandling of this case. The group was a bit larger this time. LaToya and her mother, Captain Austin, and the 2 other police officers from the initial visit went back to the Carolina Street home on the afternoon of May 10, 2012. They were joined by Reverend Maginot, 2 Lake County officers with a police dog and a DCS family case manager, Samantha Eilick. Eilick, who was there in an official capacity, told the Indianapolis Star she volunteered to go in Valerie Washington's place because Valerie didn't want to go back to the house. A county officer took his police dog around the home, but the dog didn't show any interest in the area, according to Lake County police records. Everyone else headed into the basement. Eilick touched some strange liquid she saw dripping in the basement, and said it felt slippery yet sticky between her fingers. Maginot told police he wanted to check the dirt under the stairs for a pentagram or personal objects that might have been cursed. He said a pentagram might indicate a demonic presence and possible portal to hell, according to a Lake County police report. Or if someone had died in the house and was buried under the stairs, one of the police officers dug a 4-foot by 3-foot hole beneath the stairs, unearthing a pink press-on fingernail, a white pair of panties, a political shirt pin, a lid for a small cooking pan, socks with the bottoms cut off below the ankles, candy wrappers, and a heavy metal object that looked like a weight for a drapery cord. Finding nothing else, the officer replaced the dirt. Maginot blessed some salt, which he said is a barrier to evil, and spread it under the stairs and throughout the basement. Eilick said she was later standing in the living room with the rest of the group when her left pinky finger started to tingle and whiten. She complained it felt broken. Less than 10 minutes later, Eilick said she felt as if she was having a panic attack. She couldn't breathe, so she walked outside to wait for the group. When the priest started questioning LaToya inside the house, she complained of a headache and shoulder pain. She joined Eilick outside. Captain Austin said he left the house at nightfall. Austin, who has been shot at and has investigated murders, rapes, and armed robberies during his more than 3 decades on the force, said he wasn't staying in that house past dark. The other officers continued to walk through the home. On the main floor, they noticed an oil-like substance dripping from Venetian blinds in a bedroom, but couldn't figure out where it was coming from. To make sure LaToya or her mother hadn't poured oil on the blinds, 2 of the officers used paper towels to clean it off. The officers sealed the room for 25 minutes and stood nearby so no one could walk in. When they went back in, the oil had reappeared, according to the police records. Maginot told the police the liquid was a manifestation of a paranormal or demonic presence. He wrote a report detailing his findings and asked the Bishop Dale Melzick permission to perform an exorcism on LaToya. Maginot said Melzick had never authorized an exorcism in 21 years as bishop of the Diocese of Gary. Melzick initially denied Maginot's request to do a church-sanctioned exorcism. The bishop told Maginot to contact other priests who have performed those exorcisms. Maginot said he needed other priests to give him the ritual for a minor exorcism, which does not require church approval. He said he did an intense blessing on the Carolina Street home to expel bad spirits. The same day, Maginot performed a minor exorcism on LaToya. The ritual consisted of prayers, statements, and appeals to cast out demons. 2 police officers and Eilick, the DCS family case manager, attended the ritual. Eilick said she left believing that something was going on, although she wouldn't go as far as saying it was demonic. She said she got chills during the nearly 2-hour rite. We felt like someone was in the room with you, someone breathing down your neck. Eilick said she had a string of medical problems after visiting the home. A week after she visited the house for the last time, Eilick said she got a 3rd-degree burn from a motorcycle. Within 30 days, she also broke 3 ribs jet skiing, broke a hand while she hit a table, then broke an ankle running in flip-flops. I had friends who wouldn't talk to me because they believed that something had attached itself to me, Eilick said. After the minor ritual, Maginot told LaToya to look up the names of demons that were tormenting her. Each demon had a name and personality, Maginot said. A name has power, the priest added, and he planned to use those names to fight the demons during the exorcisms. LaToya said she and a friend looked up the demons' names online by searching for demons that represented the problems the family had been having. The computer, however, kept shutting down, and LaToya said she felt sick and lightheaded during her research. After the minor rite, Maginot said Bishop Melzick gave him permission to exorcise LaToya. The ritual is the same as the minor exorcism, but more powerful because it had the backing of the Catholic Church, Maginot says. Maginot ultimately performed 3 major exorcisms on Latoya Amons, 2 in English and the last one in Latin, in June of 2012 at his Maryville church. During each, Maginot said, he praised God and condemned the devil. He pressed a crucifix against Latoya's head as he spoke. Maginot said his voice continued to get louder and more forceful until the demon weakened. He said he could tell how strong the demon was by how much Amons convulsed. 2 police officers who had kept in touch with Maginot since the home investigation stood nearby in case Latoya needed to be restrained. Latoya said she prayed with Maginot until it became too painful. She said she felt as if something inside her was trying to hold on and inflict pain at the same time. She said it was different from a natural pain, but felt as intense as giving birth. I was hurting all over from the inside out, she remembered. Eventually, Latoya fell asleep. That was the demon's way of lessening the ritual's effect. In between the second and third exorcisms, Maginot said he went on a retreat, and a woman who assisted Maginot with some of the exorcisms helped set up a backup plan in case Latoya had problems while Maginot was gone. The woman wrote a long demon name on a piece of paper and tucked it into an envelope. Then she surrounded it in blessed salt. If Latoya had problems, the woman would burn the envelope, Maginot said. By this time, Latoya and her mother had moved to Indianapolis, but they drove back for the exorcisms and court hearings as her children were still in DCS's care. Maginot said he blessed the family's new home to prevent more problems, but Amons called while Maginot was on his retreat, complaining of bad dreams, so the woman burned the envelope. She saved the ashes to burn later in a church bonfire. After that, Amons said her nightmares finally ended. In the final exorcism at the end of June 2012, Maginot said he prayed and berated the demons in Latin rather than English. Police officers did not attend, so Maginot said his brother stood guard. Maginot said Amons convulsed while he condemned the demons, but did not convulse during prayer. It would be the last time Latoya saw Maginot. She said her mother drove her back to Indianapolis, where they say they now live without fear. Latoya Amons' old home on Carolina Street became an object of local curiosity, so much so that the owner and landlord, Charles Reed, called the Gary Police Department to ask officers to stop driving by the house because it was scaring his new tenant. Within the next year since being free of the house's control, Latoya met the goals of the DCS, and in classic horror movie fashion, the family have had no supernatural experiences since then. Captain Austin still patrols Carolina Street and worked closely with the landowner of the house. Reverend Maginot has not done another exorcism in his practice, but still openly talks about the entire situation with Latoya as a true story of good versus evil. There are still open debates about Latoya's case. Some caseworkers are skeptical of Reverend Maginot and Captain Austin, believing the two only fed Latoya's narrative about ghosts, while others recognize that even the hardest of skeptics from the DCS like Valerie Washington and Samantha Eilick ended up frightened of and for Latoya's family. Then there was the problem with the origin of the home. The owner claims that the house was built in the 60s and had passed through dozens of owners, but there was never any heinous crimes reported within it. But what happened to the house? I know, I don't like cliffhangers either, but I truly feel that the story of this house has 2 parts. Now that we understand Latoya Amons' story, we can go into the next part with context. I thank you all so much for watching to the end of the video. If you want to support the Pagan Valley family, then like the video and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you all in part 2.